The first wolf came to her in the dark, the way they all eventually would. Not to be commanded, not to be fed, but simply to be touched. She was on her knees at the time, scrubbing the flagstone passage that ran between the estate's lower kitchen and the cold storage room. A task that belonged to no one in particular, and so had fallen to her, the way most tasks did. The brush moved in slow arcs. The water in the bucket had long since gone cold. She did not notice the wolf until it lowered itself onto the stone beside her, with the particular careful movement of something very large trying not to startle something very small. And she felt its warmth against her left knee before she turned her head. It was gray and enormous, its fur carrying the scent of pine and frost and something older. The particular wildness of animals that have lived free long enough to choose their own company. It was one of the Ulforking's estate wolves, the ones that ran the outer perimeter of Varnhold's winter grounds. She had seen them from a distance. Everyone had. They kept to themselves with a ferocity that was not aggression, but preference. They wanted nothing from the household and had made this clear for as long as anyone could remember. She looked at the wolf. The wolf looked at her. She had learned over the years of her position at Varnhold estate that most moments passed more safely without comment. She turned back to her work. After a moment, she moved the brush in another slow arc, and the wolf rested its chin on her knee. And they stayed like that in the cold passage for a long time, the water growing colder in the bucket, and the candle on the wall burning lower until the wolf's breathing deepened and slowed, and its eyes drifted shut. She finished the passage working around it. She did not tell anyone. There was no one to tell. There was no one at Varnhold estate who had learned her name. Her name was Maren. She had been at Varnhold for 6 years, arriving as part of a household transfer when the estate she had previously served was absorbed into the Alpha King's northern holdings. She was listed in the estate records as Omega-class domestic lower rotation, which was a formal way of saying she did whatever needed doing, and whoever assigned the work could not recall her face clearly enough to assign it to someone else. She carried water. She kept records when the record keeper was unwell. She repaired seams in the linen. She had learned in 6 years every corridor, every cold morning routine, every name of every person ranked above her, and none of them had learned hers. The Alpha King was not at Varnhold when the wolf came to her. He rarely was this deep into winter. The estate ran on its own machinery of rank and duty and habit, overseen by the estate administrator, Lady Voss, whose authority at Varnhold was complete, and whose attention Maren had spent considerable effort avoiding. Lady Voss was not cruel by temperament. She was institutional. She understood the world as a series of categories, and categories did not require names. The second wolf came 4 days later. She was in the woodyard splitting timber for the lower quarters, the task belonging to no one in particular, and therefore to her. And the black wolf with the torn left ear appeared at the edge of the yard and watched her work for a long time before it walked across the frozen ground and sat at her feet. She kept splitting wood. The wolf settled. By the time she had finished the pile, it was asleep. Its body curved around her boots like something that had decided this was where warmth lived. She left it there and carried the wood inside. The third wolf came the following morning, and then the fourth 2 days after that. She did not encourage them. She did not feed them or call them or reach for them. They came on their own authority, moving through the estate grounds with the unhurried certainty of animals that had decided something and were not interested in explaining themselves to anyone. They came to where she was working, and they settled beside her and they slept. And when she moved on, they eventually rose and followed. Not as trained animals following a command, but as large, deliberate creatures exercising a preference. The estate noticed on the 5th day. It was the under-steward who mentioned it first, catching sight of her crossing the inner yard with 3 wolves moving at her heels. Their enormous bodies close enough that their breath clouded around her skirts. He stopped walking. She kept walking. He stood in the yard for a long time after she had gone inside. By evening, it had spread through every rotation of the household staff. By the following morning, it had reached Lady Voss. Lady Voss summoned her to the receiving room before the first bell of work. The room was warm, a luxury not extended to the lower quarters, and Lady Voss stood at the tall window with her back to the door, looking out at the grounds where the snow had been falling steadily for 3 days. She was a precise woman in her 50s, her gray hair dressed severely, her posture the posture of someone who has never once in her life forgotten their own rank. Omega domestic, Lady Voss said without turning. Yes, my lady. There are reports about the perimeter wolves. Yes, my lady. Lady Voss turned. She had the particular quality of attention that high-ranking administrators develop. A complete assessment made in a single sweep. The object classified before the sweep was finished. Maren had been classified many times. She was used to the way the assessment landed on nothing, found nothing remarkable, and moved on. This time it paused. Explain it, Lady Voss said. I cannot, Maren said. They come to where I am working. I have not fed them or called them. I have no explanation. A long silence. The king arrives in 11 days, Lady Voss said. Those wolves are his. They have not come inside the estate walls willingly in the memory of anyone on the staff. She paused. Find something useful to do and stay out of sight of the outer grounds. Whatever is happening will stop on its own. Yes, my lady. She was dismissed. It did not stop on its own. By the time the Alpha King's advance riders reached Varnhold 7 days later, every wolf in the estate's outer pack had been seen sleeping somewhere in Marin's vicinity. The gray one with the frost-pale fur spent its nights outside the door of the lower quarter dormitory where she slept. The black one with the torn ear had taken to lying across the bottom stair of the servants' passage in a way that made it technically impossible to use the stair without stepping over it, and which several household members had begun doing with a caution that was almost comical. The others moved in and out of the estate grounds at their usual hours, but they oriented differently now. They had a direction, an axis, and the axis was her. The advance riders saw them and reported it to the man who arrived 4 days later. His name was Caius, Alpha King of the Northern Reaches, and he arrived at Varnhold the way all extremely powerful people arrive in places that already know they are powerful. Without performance, without announcement, without any particular effort to arrange himself for observation. He rode in under a sky that had been gray for 2 weeks, his coat dark against the snow. His company of 12 riders spread loosely behind him, and the estate assembled itself at the gate with the speed of people who had been ready for days. He was tall in the way that was not about height, but about density. The impression of a man who had been made with more material than ordinary people, who occupied space differently. His face was not handsome in any soft or available way. It was precise, marked by years of cold and decision, and the particular cost of being the fixed point around which a great deal of power returned. Marin was not in the assembling household. She was in the east storeroom, inventorying the preserved goods against the winter accounting, which was a task that had been on the work list for 3 weeks, and which no one else had touched. She heard the sound of the arrival through the stone walls, the horses and the greetings, and Lady Voss's carrying voice, and she kept counting jars. The gray wolf was asleep on her feet. She became aware that someone was standing in the storeroom doorway approximately 4 seconds before she turned to see who it was. Something in the change of the air, the particular weight of an attention that was not accidental. She turned. The Alpha King stood in the doorway of the east storeroom. He was not in the doorway for any administrative reason. He was in the doorway because he had entered Varnhold, been received by his staff, been told about the wolves, and had begun asking questions that eventually led him through the estate until he found where the wolf was. He looked at the wolf sleeping on the flagstone at her feet. He looked at her. She set down her pen. She turned fully to face him. She did not flinch. "Forgive me," she said. "I should have stood when you entered. I did not hear you at the door." She made a small gesture toward the wolf. "It has been here since early morning." "I see that," he said. His voice was low and even. Not the voice of a man who raised it except when the situation required, which this clearly did not. "What is your name?" "Marin," she said. A pause that meant he was waiting for more. "Omega Domestic, lower rotation, my lord. I arrived with the household transfer from the Selvoth estate 6 years ago." He was still looking at her. Not in the way the assessment looks, filing and dismissing, but in the way of a person who has encountered something and is not yet sure of its category. "The gray wolf," he said, "has not willingly entered the inner estate grounds in 4 years. "Yes," she said, "I have been told. It is sleeping on your feet." "Yes." Another pause. The wolf, as though aware it was being discussed, twitched its tail once without waking. "How long?" he said. 11 days since the first one. 7 since the pack began coming regularly." He was quiet for a moment. Not the quiet of a man who had run out of things to say, but of one who was thinking with some care. "Continue your inventory," he said. "I will speak with you later." He left. She turned back to the shelves and picked up her pen and stood there for a moment, her hand not quite steady, before she resumed counting. He spoke with Lady Voss first, then the estate's senior tracker, then the record keeper, an elderly man named Orvin, who had been at Varnhold for 30 years, and who maintained the estate's historical logs with a precision that was its own form of devotion. It was Orvin who found the entry. He brought it to the Alpha King in the estate's small library that evening, a leather volume with the date written in fading ink along the spine, and he opened it to a page that had been turned to before, its corner worn soft with old handling. "My lord," Orvin said, "the last recorded instance of the estate wolves sleeping under an outside hand." He set the volume on the table and pointed to the entry. 99 years and 4 months ago, the winter of the old Alpha's reign, before the line passed your grandfather's branch. He paused. The wolves' pack at that time was descended from the same bloodline as the current pack. The record notes that they slept through the night under the hands of a woman whose name is listed in the household transfer rolls. She was an Omega domestic. He closed the volume carefully. My lord, it has not happened since. The Alpha King looked at the entry for a long time. 100 years, he said, approximately. Yes, a silence. What happened to her, he said, the woman in this record. Orvin hesitated. The record is incomplete. She is in the transfer rolls but not the subsequent years. The entry for her rotation ends that winter. A longer silence. Tell no one about this entry, the Alpha King said. Not yet. Yes, my lord. He sat with the volume after Orvin left in the cold library, with the fire burning low, and read the entry 4 times. The wolves, he knew, were not arbitrary. They were the oldest creature knowledge available to his bloodline, older than his rank, older than the estate, older than the administrative category of Omega domestic, lower rotation. If the wolves had decided something, the wolves had reasons. The question was what they had decided. He began to watch her, not with the overt attention of authority, not summoning her, not assigning her to visible tasks, not altering the household routines in any way that would make her visible to Lady Voss's institutional calculations. He watched her the way the wolves watched, from a position at rest without telegraphing interest. From the window of the east passage as she carried the morning water. From the library door, left open 3 in, as she moved through the corridor with her work basket. From the upper gallery, looking down into the inner yard, as she crossed the snow with 3 wolves moving at her heels. She never performed for the observation. She did not arrange herself. She simply moved through the estate doing what needed doing, and the wolves moved with her. And she talked to them occasionally in a low voice that he could not hear from his distance, but that caused their ears to turn toward her with the particular attention of animals who were genuinely interested. He watched her stop in the inner yard to crouch in the snow and examine the gray wolf's front paw. Some small injury. She must have felt it in the way the wolf stepped. And he watched her hold the paw in both her bare hands and look at it carefully, and then hold it steady against the cold while she reached into her work basket and produced a strip of linen and wrapped it with a neatness that came from someone who had done this before. He watched the gray wolf lower its enormous head and rest it against her shoulder while she worked. He had never seen that wolf touch anyone without invitation in 4 years. He had never seen it lean into anything. He stepped back from the window. That evening, he sent word through the household for Marin to come to the estate library after the supper hour. He had the message worded neutrally. The Alpha King would speak with her regarding the household records so that Lady Voss would file it in the appropriate category and think no more of it. She arrived at the library door a few minutes after the supper hour. Her hair still damp at the temple from washing before she came. Her work basket over her arm. Her posture, the posture of someone who has been called before authority enough times to be composed about it. She did not look afraid. She looked like a person who had calculated the variables and decided that composure was the correct tool for the situation. He gestured to the chair across the small table. She sat. He set the leather volume between them and opened it to Orvin's entry and turned it so she could read it. She read it. Her expression did not change, but something shifted in the quality of her stillness. The wolves here, he said, what it says in this record. Yes, she said, I can read. A pause. Forgive me, I did not intend that as you intended it as an acknowledgement that you understood the record, he said. It was accurate, I was not offended. He leaned forward slightly. The pack made a choice. In 4 weeks I have to present the estate's winter accounts to the council at Carveth. 3 council members have been raising procedural motions about the estate's operating status for 18 months, and any anomaly here becomes material in that context. He paused. I am telling you this because you are entitled to understand the landscape. Not to alarm you, to inform you. She looked at him steadily. He had not seen her look away from him once across any of the moments he had observed. Other people looked away from him. It was a natural response to the weight of the position he occupied. She simply did not. What do you want to know? She said. How it started? I was scrubbing the passage floor. The gray wolf came and lay down beside me. I finished scrubbing around it. There was nothing I did to cause it and nothing I have done since to encourage it. You wrapped its paw today? A pause. Yes. How did you know it was injured? I did not see it limping. There was a slight change in how it stepped. The right side was fractionally lower to compensate. I have seen it in horses. I did not think about it, I just stopped. He was quiet for a moment. Where did you learn to read an animal's gait? The estate I was at before. Selveth had a kennel. The kennel master was old and had trouble with his eyes in his later years. I assisted him when I could. He taught me a few things. She paused. I did not study it formally. I am not a healer. The wolf does not know that, he said. Something moved across her face. Not quite a smile, but the particular quality of someone who might have smiled under different circumstances. I suppose not, she said. He looked at her for a moment directly in the way he had not looked at her from windows. "The council at Carveth," he said. "The 3 members I mentioned, their concern is that Vornhold is operating with too much independent staff relative to the estate's current output. They have been building a case for a reduction in household role." He paused. "If that reduction proceeds on the terms they have proposed, lower rotation staff would transfer out several estates in the Eastern Partition." She received this without moving. "I am telling you this," he said, "because it is relevant to your position, not because it has been decided. It has not been decided." "I understand," she said. Her voice was steady. It had been steady throughout. "Is there anything you need from me for the accounts or the records or anything that would be useful to you at Carveth?" He looked at her. "No," he said, "not at present. You may go." She rose. She picked up her work basket. She walked to the door. "Marin," she stopped. "The entry in this record," he said. "The woman described in this entry, I intend to find out what happened to her." A pause. "Yes," she said. "I think you should." She left. He sat with the volume for another hour after she had gone. And outside the library windows, the snow fell in the particular patient way of winter that intends to stay. And he thought about wolves and about the specific quality of composure that is a survival skill rather than an affectation, and about what it meant that a pack of animals which had refused human proximity for a century had decided that the most invisible person in his household was worth sleeping beside. Lady Voss had noticed the library meeting by morning. She was too precise an administrator not to and too experienced to ask directly, but she arranged the next 3 days' work assignments in a way that kept Marin's rotation in the furthest reaches of the estate. The linen storage, the root cellar inventory, the outer passage repairs, spaces that were legitimate and busy and very far from the main house. Marin worked through all of them without comment. The wolves found her anyway. She was in the root cellar on the 2nd day, cataloging the winter store when she heard the sound above. Movement on the cellar stairs. The particular heavy tread that was not human. 2 wolves came down the stairs with the patient determination of animals that had identified where she was and seen no particular reason not to go there. She made room for them between the shelving rows. They settled against her legs and went to sleep. She worked around them. She was in the outer passage the following day working on the stone repair with the slow, methodical care the work required when she became aware that she was being watched. She turned. The Alpha King stood at the passage entrance. He was not in a coat. He had come from inside the estate, not from the grounds, which meant he had followed the wolf's direction rather than coming specifically for her. The gray wolf was at his knee. It had come to him for the first time in 4 years, simply and without coaxing, and it had walked him here. He looked at her. He looked at the wolves settled around her in the cold passage. He looked at the gray wolf beside him, which looked back at him with an expression that, had it been on a human face, would have read as mild exasperation at how long this was taking. He walked the length of the passage and crouched beside her on the stone. He did not speak for a moment. She kept working, setting the mortar with the careful pressure of someone who knew the paste would not hold if she rushed it. "There is a record," he said finally. "In the regional archive at Carveth, the woman in Orvan's entry, I had my archivist search. She was transferred in the following spring from Varnhold to an estate in the south. There is a petition in the archive filed by the administrator of that time." He paused. Petition requested her removal on the grounds that her influence over the estate wolves constituted an unpredictable variable in the estate's management. He was quiet for a moment. The petition was approved. The administrator who filed it was appointed to a regional council position the following year. She set down the mortar tool. "I see," she said. "The woman's name in the regional archive is listed only as her classification." A pause. "That is the usual practice," she said. "Yes," he said. "It is." He looked at the stone repair she had been working. "This has been left undone for some time. 3 winters, I think, from the freeze damage. No one was assigned to it, and so you did it." "It needed doing." He was quiet again. Outside the passage, the snow had stopped. The particular silence of an estate after snowfall, the muffled held quality of a world padded in white came through the stone walls. "The petition at Carveth," he said. "The 3 council members who have been building a case against Varnhold's staff levels. One of them was on the estate's board in the period after the records in Orvan's entry. He is the oldest of the 3. He said it carefully, with the precision of a man who was being precise on purpose. "I do not believe in coincidence as a general operating principle." She turned and looked at him directly. "What do you believe in?" she said. He held her gaze for a moment. "Evidence," he said, "and in what the wolves know that I do not." He rose. He did not move toward the door immediately. He stood for a moment looking down at the gray wolf which had settled at Marin's side in the passage and was watching him with calm expectation. "There are 11 days before I leave for Carveth," he said. "I'm going to need the estate's complete records for the past 3 years, not the administrative summary. The working records. The actual rotation logs and supply accounts. He paused. I was told you kept the records when Orvin was unwell last winter. For 8 weeks, she said. Yes. Are you familiar with the full accounting structure? I can find what you need. He nodded. He moved toward the passage entrance. He stopped. Marin, he said, and there was something different in the way he said it. Not the address of an authority to a lower rotation staff member, but the particular quality of someone saying a name they have only recently learned and are not yet certain they are allowed to use. My lord. This estate runs because of people who do what needs doing without being asked, and without being seen. He looked at the passage repair, at the wolves, at the woman crouched on the cold stone in the middle of work that had been left undone for 3 winters. I am aware that I have not been looking at it. She was quiet for a moment. You are looking now, she said. He held her gaze. Then he walked out of the passage into the white morning light. He spent the following days preparing for Carveth in the way he prepared for every council engagement, with the meticulous patient construction of an argument that could not be taken apart. He had been doing this for 22 years, since the line of authority passed to him at 20, and the council had spent the following decade testing every edge of his position. And he had learned that the council's institutional weapons were most effectively answered by the council's own institutional standards. He worked with Marin on the records. She brought them to the library each morning. Not the summary volumes, but the actual working logs, the ones that showed what the estate genuinely ran on. And she knew where everything was. Not because she had been assigned to know, but because 6 years of being the person who did what needed doing had given her a complete map of Vornholt's actual operations. She moved through the records with a quietness that he had come to understand was not shyness but efficiency. She did not use words when a document could speak, did not explain when pointing was sufficient, did not perform for the observation. On the 3rd morning, he looked up from the supply account she had placed in front of him and said, You knew about the petition. She paused. Not specifically, she said. Not the document, but I knew the pattern. How long? You learn the pattern when you are in the category it is used against, she said. You learn to recognize when a process that appears neutral is being used for a directional purpose. And you stayed? There was nowhere particular to go that was safer. A pause. And the estate needed people who did not leave when the work was difficult. I am not, she added carefully, sentimental about it. I stayed because it was practical. The work is real here. What I do here has effects. He looked at her. Yes, he said, it does. She reached across and turned the next document toward him without looking at him. And he read it. And they worked in the quiet library while the wolf slept at her feet, and the fire burned down, and the snow began again outside the windows. On the 6th day before his departure for Carveth, Lady Voss filed a formal notation with the estate's administrative record. Marin was shown the notation by the house scribe, who handed it to her with an expression of careful neutrality that told her everything she needed to know about how it had been received downstairs. The notation characterized the wolf's behavior as a disruption to standard estate operations. It recommended that the Omega domestic, identified as the source of the disruption, be transferred to the Eastern rotation before the next quarter review. It cited 3 administrative precedents. The 3rd precedent was the petition from 100 years ago. Marin read the notation in the cold stairwell. She read it twice. She folded it precisely and put it in her work basket under the record volume she was carrying to the library. She set the notation on the library table in front of the Alpha King without comment. He read it. He read it without expression, the way he read everything completely, and then a second time. And then he set it flat on the table and looked at it for a moment. She found the Carveth record, he said. Not a question, I believe so, or she knew before I did. He was quiet for a moment. The notation cites the old petition. She could only have known to cite it if someone in the Carveth Council network had shown it to her. Marin was still. That would mean the council member you mentioned, she said. Yes. He looked at the notation. She has been reporting to Carveth on estate operations for at minimum a quarter, possibly longer. A silence. I have been keeping duplicate records, Marin said carefully. He looked at her. Of the estate accounts, she said. Not because I expected this specifically, because the working records and the administrative summaries have not matched for 18 months. And when records do not match, it is usually because someone has a reason for the discrepancy. And I find it practical to know what the correct numbers actually are. She reached into her work basket and set a second set of documents on the table beside Lady Voss's notation. He looked at the documents. Then he looked at her. How long have you been keeping these? He said. Since the discrepancy began, 18 months. Yes, a long pause. You have been keeping a secondary account record of this estate for 18 months, he said, and no one knew. No one asks what is in the work basket of a lower rotation domestic, she said. That is rather the point. Something moved across his face. It was not quite the expression of a man who had encountered something he could not manage. It was the expression of a man who had encountered something he had not managed and was now deciding what to do about that. If I present these at Carveth, he said, alongside the council member's correspondence with Lady Voss, which I can establish from the estate's mail records, the institutional case is complete. Yes, she said. The notation becomes evidence of collusion rather than administration. Yes. He was quiet for a long moment. And Lady Voss, he said, she believes she is acting correctly, Marin said. She has worked within the category system for her entire career. She has been told by someone she considers authoritative that the wolves are a destabilizing factor and that I am the source. She has acted on that instruction using the tools available to her. A pause. She is not malicious. She is institutional. Those are different problems. He looked at her. You are characterizing the woman who has filed a transfer petition against you with considerable charity. I am characterizing her accurately, Marin said. I find accuracy more useful than charity. The silence that followed was longer. Outside the library windows, the wolves were moving in the estate grounds in the early dusk, their dark shapes passing across the snow, patient and deliberate. I will speak with Lady Voss, he said finally, before I leave for Carveth. She will not file another notation. He paused. And when I return from Carveth, there will be changes to how this estate's administrative records are structured. She did not say anything. You should be in a named position, he said, with a specific designation and a salary that corresponds to what you actually do, rather than what your classification suggests you do. He said it carefully, in the way of someone making a statement that he was aware would require something of him. I am aware that this should have been the case before this conversation. Marin looked at the records on the table. The work was the same, she said, named or not. Yes, he said, but you were not. She looked at him then directly, with the particular quality of attention that held the wolf's gaze without looking away. He held it. I am not offering you this because the wolves chose you, he said. I am offering it because I have watched you do this work, and I know what it is worth. The wolves were faster than I was. That is my failure, not a qualification for you. She was quiet for a moment. I will stay, she said, if the position is what I think it is. What do you think it is? Estate records manager with access to both the working and administrative archives, no rotation assignment, a direct reporting line to you when you are in residence. A pause. Yes, he said, that is what it is. She nodded. She picked up her work basket. She walked toward the door. Marin, she stopped. When I return from Carveth, he said, I intend to ask you something that is not about the records. She was still for a moment. I will be here, she said. She left. He stood at the library window and watched the wolves cross the estate grounds in the last of the winter light. And he thought about the 100 years in Orvin's entry, and about the woman whose name was not in the subsequent records, and about the particular patience required to do the work for 6 years without anyone learning your name. He went to Carveth. He was there for 9 days. He presented the records, the working accounts, and the matching secondary set alongside the correspondence between the council member and the Varnhold estate administrator, which the estate's mail archive provided without difficulty once he was looking for it. The institutional case was exactly what Marin had said it was, complete. The council member had no procedural response to his own letters. The motion against Varnhold staff levels was withdrawn on the 4th day. The council member requested a leave of administrative duty on the 6th. Lady Voss received a formal communication from the council's oversight board on the 7th. The Alpha King rode back to Varnhold on the 9th day, arriving at dusk with his company in the particular relief of a man returning to a place that had become, without his entirely noticing it, more than an estate. The estate assembled at the gate in the dusk snow. Marin was not in the assembly. She was in the library, where the records had been organized and the working accounts laid out and the fire lit and the lamps arranged to give the most useful light, and all of this had been done without instruction because it needed doing. The gray wolf was asleep under the table. He stood in the library doorway for a moment, looking at her. She was working through a column of figures, her pen moving in the careful, even way she did everything. Her dark hair loose from its braid at the end of a long day. She had ink on her right wrist. She did not look up immediately, not from inattention, but from the particular quality of someone who completes the sentence before they stop. Then she looked up. The council member, she said, the motion was withdrawn, and Lady Voss will remain in her position with a restructured administrative scope. He paused. She is a capable administrator. She was used by someone who understood how institutional certainty can be pointed in a direction. He came into the library. She asked me to give you this. He set a folded letter on the table. Marin looked at it. She learned your name, he said quietly. Marin picked up the letter. She held it for a moment without opening it. And the position, she said, stands as discussed. He sat down across the table. He looked at her directly with the particular quality of attention that had been building without his full recognition, since he first stood in the doorway of the east storeroom and watched a wolf sleep at the feet of the most invisible person in his household. I said when I returned I would ask you something that was not about the records. She set the letter down. Yes, she said. I am asking if you will consider if the position we discussed is sufficient, or if you would consider something that is not administrative. He paused. He was precise and deliberate, and she could see that it was costing him something to be neither of those things right now, to simply say the direct thing without the shelter of formal language. I am asking plainly if you will let me know you, not as the king who employs you, as a person who has been paying attention belatedly and finds that having started I do not want to stop. She was quiet. He waited. You should know, she said carefully, that I have never been particularly impressed by rank. I know that, he said. I am not asking you to be, or by wolves as a recommendation. I know that too. She looked at him. He looked back. Ask me again, she said, in the spring when the estate is not operating under an institutional crisis and you have had time to determine whether this is a decision or a circumstance. A pause. That is fair, he said. I know it is, she said. She picked up her pen. Now, the Carveth accounts need to be reconciled against the estate records before the quarter closes, and I have been waiting 9 days for you to bring me the council's figures. He looked at her for a moment. Then he reached into his coat and produced the Carveth account documents and set them on the table between them. And the gray wolf's tail moved once under the table. And they worked through the evening in the warm library while the snow fell steadily outside and the estate settled around them into quiet. The spring came slowly to Varnhold, the way it always did in the north, not with warmth, but with light first, an extra half-hour each day of gray brightness that was better than nothing. The ice broke on the small stream at the estate's east edge in the 3rd week of the 3rd month, and the snow retreated from the inner yard, and the wolves began ranging further on their morning circuits, drunk on the new distance. Maren had been in the named position for 4 months. The difference was smaller than she had expected in the daily texture of the work. The records were the same records. The estate ran on the same operations. The work that had needed doing still needed doing, and she did it. The difference was in how the work landed. Lady Voss had learned her name and used it, and the hesitant correctness of the acknowledgement told Maren more about what had changed than any formal notification could. The household staff had adjusted with the practical efficiency of people who update their categories when the categories stop working. The scribe who had handed her the notation in the stairwell brought her the morning correspondence now with a punctuality that was its own kind of apology. She kept the duplicate records. The working accounts and the administrative summaries matched with an acceptable range, and she watched them for the place where they might stop matching, and they did not. The Alpha King was at Vornhold through the winter and into the early spring longer than was his habit at any particular estate. He did not explain this to anyone in administrative terms. He worked through the morning correspondence in the library. He rode the estate's borders with his senior tracker in the afternoons, learning the property in the way of someone who had been passing through it and was now choosing to know it. He ate at the estate's main table in the evenings, which he had not done in previous winters. He asked her to walk with him one morning when the light was clear in the outer grounds where the wolves moved. She went. They walked the east track in silence for a while, the ground still hard under the thinning snow, the wolves ranging ahead and circling back with the unhurried energy of animals in the good air. She had her coat, her work basket over her arm out of habit, her boots finally repaired so the cold stayed out. Spring, he said. She looked at the track ahead. Spring, she agreed. He stopped walking. She stopped. He turned to look at her. He had the particular quality of stillness that came from someone very accustomed to making decisions and choosing to stand in the moment before this one because the moment before was still available. I have been asking myself, he said, whether this is a decision or a circumstance as you ask me to. And it is a decision. He paused. It has been a decision for longer than I was willing to acknowledge, which is worth saying, because the time I was not acknowledging it is time I owe you the honesty of. She looked at him. You are very careful with words, she said. I am trying to be precise. I know, she said. That is what I meant. You use precision when something matters to you. A pause. Yes, he said. I do. She looked out at the wolves in the morning light, the gray one with the frost-pale fur moving through the bare branch edge of the estate forest, the black one with the torn ear sitting on a ridge of frozen earth watching them both with its patient, uncategorizable attention. Ask me, she said. He asked her. She said, yes. It was not a dramatic yes. It was not performed or announced to the estate grounds or the circling wolves or the cold spring sky. It was the yes of a person who has thought carefully and arrived at a conclusion that, once arrived at, required no further deliberation. She turned back to the track and continued walking. After a moment, he fell into step beside her. The gray wolf circled back from the forest edge and walked between them. In the late spring, when Vornholt's grounds had emerged from under the snow, and the estate accounts had been reconciled to everyone's satisfaction, and the Carveth Council had closed its review without further action, the library had changed in the way that rooms change when they are used daily by people who have found their way to ease with each other. There were 2 chairs at the table now, both with cushions, because she had pointed out one morning that the library chairs were designed for people who sat in them for an hour, and he had been sitting in them for 6, and he had agreed without comment, and the cushions had appeared by the following morning, which told her something about the way he dealt with things that had been pointed out to him. The gray wolf slept under the table. The black one occupied the space near the fireplace, with such regularity that the housekeeping staff had stopped moving it, and had simply begun cleaning around it. She had the estate records in the order she wanted them. The working accounts and the administrative summaries matched. The correspondence from Carveth was routine now, arriving with the expected regularity of an institutional relationship that had recalibrated to its correct register. Lady Voss handled the external correspondence with a precision that had lost its directed quality. She was simply administering without an agenda, and she was good at it. He told her things in the evenings. It was not conversation in the conventional sense. It was more like report, delivered without obvious expectation of response, the way someone accustomed to carrying information alone begins to set it down somewhere. The difficulty with the Northern Borders supply line, his opinion on the Council's proposed revision of the Estate Inheritance Code, which he considered procedurally sound but historically illiterate. The particular quality of irritation produced by the senior council member who had replaced the one now on extended leave, who was competent but constitutionally unable to be brief. She listened. Sometimes she said something. He absorbed it with the quality of someone who was not used to receiving considered opinions without also managing the person who offered them, and was learning that this was not required. She worked her morning correspondence at the table while he worked his, and the wolves settled where they settled, and the estate moved through its routines, and the silence between the working hours was the silence of 2 people who had stopped managing the distance. She still had ink on her wrist most mornings. Her boots were repaired, but she kept the same pair. There was no particular reason to replace something that was doing its job. She walked the estate's corridors with the same unhurried efficiency as always, and the corridors responded differently now. Not with the particular blindness of an institution that has decided not to see, but with the ordinary acknowledgement of people who have updated their categories and moved on. She was seen. It had happened simply and without spectacle, the way most true things happen. Not announced, not performed, not awarded, simply arrived at through the patient accumulation of a woman doing the work, and a man who had eventually looked up from his own authority long enough to see it being done. One morning Clear's throat in early summer, she came into the library to find him standing at the window with a document in his hand and the gray wolf sitting at his feet. And he turned when she entered and said her name, Marin, precise and unhurried. And the wolf's tail moved across the floor in its slow, contented arc. And the windows were open to the first warm morning, and the accounts were in order on the table. He held the document out. She took it. It was the Carveth record, the one with the old petition, the woman who had been transferred, whose name was not in the subsequent rolls. I found it, he said. Her name, she looked at him. It was in the receiving estate's records, he said. In the South. She remained there. She is in the rolls for another 30 years. She looked down at the document. Good, she said quietly. I thought you would want to know. Yes, she said. I did. She set the document on the table. She sat down in her chair, the one with the cushion, in the warm library with the window open to the summer morning, and the wolf settling back at her feet with the particular sigh of a very large animal that has found its exact correct location in the world. He sat down across from her. Outside, the pack moved through the estate grounds in the morning light. The gray and the black and the others ranging through the open spaces of Varnhold with the unhurried confidence of animals that have made their decision and have been proven correct in it. The ledger was open on the table. She picked up her pen. The morning began.